Hello, hello, hello. This is Christopher Nanny from GoMakeThings.com. And today I wanted to show you how you can use the CSS is pseudo-class to dramatically reduce your CSS selector complexity. Real quick before we dig in, I did just want to let you know that this video and others like it are made possible thanks to the generous support of my Go Make Things members. A recurring membership helps me create more videos like this and also get you some cool perks. If that sounds interesting, head on over to gomakethings.com/join to learn more. With that out of the way, let's dig into our code. Last week, I actually finally had a reason to use the newish is pseudo class. It's been around for a while, ish. I haven't had an excuse to use it. I tend to not just jump right into new things until I have a reason to. But I was working on a website where I had some really gnarly CSS selectors, and is just completely saved my ass. So let's take a look at how it works. The is pseudo class accepts a comma separated list of selectors, and it can be used to group them together. So for example, here I've got a bunch of headings with a font weight of bold, and then I've got those same headings wrapped in is, and I've given them a font weight of bold. These two selectors do the exact same thing. So you're probably looking at this and thinking like, why the fuck would I ever need this, right? As written, you'd be right. This is pretty pointless. Where is really shines is when you have a complex set of selectors, usually nested, and sometimes repeated. So let me show you an actual example from an actual project I worked on. So I recently worked on a website where I had a collection of background utility classes for creating colored backgrounds. Most of them were light, but I had a small collection of them that were dark. And the normal default blackish text color, you couldn't see it properly. There wasn't enough contrast, so we need to flip the color to white as well as the link colors in those darker backgrounds. This site also had a custom heading color. So rather than just being the default black text, the headings were their own kind of special color, and that also needed to be overwritten. And so the original selector set for these backgrounds looked like this. And you can see it keeps going, right? So this is really gnarly. There's a lot of repeated, I got to style all the headings for all three of these background colors. I need to make sure that any link that's not a button shows up as white. I need to make sure that any fig captions in these has an adjusted color. I need to make sure that on hover, those links have a different color styling. And it's a lot, right? So I was able to take all of this and actually, let's pull up a second pane so you can see these side by side. So I was able to take all of this and rewrite it to look like this. I lied. Let's actually pull this back into one column because it's with the wrapping, it's harder to see. The way this works is, and this doesn't have to be an is, like these could theoretically be on their own. They arguably even should be on their own. Like I actually think it might be better to just write those like this. But for all of these selectors here, right? So this whole repeated shebang over here, I am able to say, okay, for all three of these utility classes, within those, anything that matches these selectors, apply this style to. This should, if we're being consistent here, we should write it like that, right? I didn't do my homework properly. I copy pasted this from the theme, but you don't know what those variables are. So that's not going to be very useful for you. So let's go ahead and pull these in like that. There we go. So so that whole giant chunk right here gets reduced down to this. This not quite as unruly chunk gets reduced down to this. So I don't have to repeat fig caption over and over again. And same thing with this, where I've just got kind of this repeated selector here, just for all three of these background colors, any link that's not a button that's hovered, make this be the color. And so there's just a dramatic difference in both complexity and readability for both of these, or for all three of these selector sets. One other thing that's worth mentioning is there's another way you could approach this, technically, using CSS nesting. So if you've ever written Sass before, nesting is now native to CSS. So you could take this and rewrite it like this, where I've got my selectors, and then within those, if I have any headings or any link, we're going to make them white. If I have a fig caption, we're going to make it this color, and any link that's not a button that's hovered, we're going to make it this color. I actually personally find the CSS nesting approach easier to read, and that's largely because I've spent the majority of my career writing Sass flavored CSS. So I'm used to nesting. I think that's the aesthetic that just kind of clicks best in my head, but that's mostly a matter of taste or personal opinion. So, if you don't agree, that's fine. That's cool. That's expected. The more compelling argument for continuing to use is instead of nesting is that in terms of browser compatibility, is goes much further back. So it's the kind of thing you could slap into your project right now, and you don't have to worry about someone who's on an iPhone that they haven't updated in a while seeing things that don't look right. It's gonna work much better, much further back for a much larger chunk of folks, and you're still gonna get that easier authoring. The other interesting thing is that, and this is a little bit of a gotcha, my buddy Killian Valkhoff wrote an article about some gotchas with CSS nesting, and in there he talks a little bit about the is pseudo-class. And one of the things he notes is that when you use is, it actually takes on the highest specificity of whatever selectors are in it. So if you have a collection of selectors that have different levels of specificity, is will default to whichever one has the highest specificity. So in here, he uses an example with an element selector and an ID. This whole selector will take on the specificity of an ID selector, not an element selector. And that can have some unintended consequences if you are not kind of thinking through all the different scenarios. This is the kind of selector I would personally never write. I'm usually grouping like things together, so I don't see this as a huge deal breaker. One other thing Killian also notes that's kind of interesting is if you use CSS nesting with and, which those of you who have written Sass nesting will be familiar with, under the hood, the browser is actually wrapping, it's using is for and, like it's kind of hot replacing it under the hood. So this same kind of set of concerns around is and specificity can manifest with CSS nesting as well. Regardless of all these various concerns, I'm grateful is exists. I can't wait to use it on more projects. This is absolutely incredible. I do not currently recommend using nesting. I think in a few years, hopefully less than that, in a little while, I think nesting will have enough support that it might be the kind of thing I reached for more regularly. These days, I'm still not touching it on production projects because I don't like to run my CSS through a processor. I prefer to just write vanilla CSS and use vanilla CSS in the browser. If you're using some sort of processor that will take this and spit it out unnested, like CSS Nano or Sass or something like that, go to town. But until then, I think is amazing, and I hope you do too. I'm going to drop all of the source code for today's video down in the description below. And I'm also going to drop a link to Killian's article. Real quick before you go, one last thing I did want to mention is that I recently decided to stop selling expensive courses that most folks can only afford with a corporate training budget. It felt weird. It felt wrong. I learned through free resources. I want to make sure that all of my stuff is as accessible to as many people as possible. And that includes YouTube videos like this one. So if you enjoyed it, one of the best things you can do to support me, to help me make more videos like this, is through a Go Make Things membership. If you go to gomake.things.com/join, you can learn more. For as little as $3 a month, you can get access to this amazing portal that includes just a massive digital garden of all the things I know about web development and more. I've got a whole bunch of stuff around ADHD because I am a developer with ADHD, including my tips for how to get a bunch of shit done, how I use Obsidian to manage my tasks and better manage my time. And I've even got some fun, I'll call them like off-topic things in here. So like if you ever wanted to go to Disney World, I've got a whole section on travel. I've got some stuff on tabletop role-playing games. And you get access to my private Discord community, which is really hopping. It's super busy, not in an overwhelming way. There's just a lot of folks there answering questions, sharing things they've learned, making new friends. It's a really great place. I love it. It's like one of my favorite places on the internet. You can find all that over at gomakethings.com/join. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next week. And as always, like, share, comment, subscribe. If you've got any questions, ask them below. They inspire future videos. And thanks for watching. Cheers.